Hello YouTube, it's DasGregor and welcome back to a Gentoo in review. Today we will be looking at doing a minor kernel upgrade. It was brought to my attention last week when we did the Portage update, and I let you guys sit along with me, that there was actually a new kernel that had gotten dropped down. And so I thought, hey, this might be a great opportunity to show you what you should do and what you shouldn't be afraid of when you get something like that happening. First off, when you do get a new kernel that comes across, don't be afraid that it's going to wipe out your old kernel and wipe anything else out. Everything will remain the same as if you'd never done anything, and it will continue to use your old kernel. One thing that you will notice though is, I'm going to go ahead and minimize this so we can go forward. I have brought forth my console here. I have made it a little bit bigger, hopefully easier for you to use, and we will look at a few things. But one thing that I wanted to say was, if you do an ls/user source, you're going to see that currently we have Linux 3.10.17 and Linux 3.10.7. Now, when I rebuilt this system about a little over a month or so, or whenever it was, that's the kernel 3.10.7 that was available, so I used it. And they have upgraded now to 3.10.17. And if we were to look at that, we'll see that currently my Linux, user source Linux, is pointing at Linux 10.7. Now what we want to do first off here is we want to have Linux point to the new version. Now we do that by doing eselect kernel list, and we'll see that we now have two options for the kernel package. One is 3.10.7, one is 3.10.17. So we do eselect kernel set 2. And if we are to list it again, we now see that we are at 3.10.7, and if we were to do another ls/lsa, we'll see that now user source Linux is now pointing to Linux 3.10.17 instead of 3.10.7. So what we now want to do is boot into user source, not boot into, but go into Linux, user source Linux, so that we're at that root. And I like to go ahead and bring over my script, my build script, from the old area. So cp.back and then linux-3.10.7 Gentoo build script dots. Now I've already copied it, so and I've edited it already. So I'm not going to do that, but we're going to now edit it again so that we can show you what we have done here. It's going to do a make menuconfig so we can take a look at all our options. It's going to make the kernel. It's going to make the modules install. It's going to copy the bzImage. And I have changed this so that instead of it being 3.10.7, it's going to now copy it to 3.10.17-Gentoo. Now what that's going to do is it's going to still leave our 3.10.7 kernel available in case we have to go backwards. And then it's going to go ahead and force 3.10.17-Gentoo to be having a symbolic link for vmlinuz, which I do just to make grub easier to configure. Afterwards it just echoes that everything was good. So we get out of that. Now if you're ever concerned about what changes have been made in the newest kernels, you can always go to the web, to kernel.org, and you can see the list of available kernels. You can actually download them from here. If you ever wanted a vanilla kernel and you wanted to just completely go without anybody's flavor or anything put into it, you could grab it from here. You can check the security, etc. of that. You can view the patches. You can view the change logs, etc. Great place go. You can also get the latest and greatest. Like right here, it's now saying 3.12.1 is the latest. But this is where you're going to get a lot of your resources for the Linux kernel. I've kind of glanced it over and I haven't seen too much that has changed. So in that case, a lot of times you can use your .config file from a previous. You don't want to do that, for instance, if you're going 3.10 to say 3.11 or 3.12, there might be a lot of changes that are just too many, and then you'd want to start over. But for right now, this is just a minor change, going from 3.10.7 to 3.10.17. So what we're going to do next is we're going to copy our config file from Linux 3.10.7 to here, and we want to go ahead and run our script. So we do run build.sh. It brings up our kernel configuration. We can see that we are looking at 3.10.17 at the top. The three most important places to go if you're ever just wanting to glance and just make sure things look proper: processor type and features. You're going to go and make sure that your processor family is proper. You're going to want to go into device managers and just start going through all of these that are important to you, whether or not you have parallel port support. I mean, some laptops still use it, some still have it, so you might want to look at that. Plug and play support, SCSI support, your SATA drivers. But the main thing is you're going to want to make sure that you have all of your most important drivers, such as your audio, your video, USB 3.0 if that's needed, FireWire if you have it. You want to make sure webcam if it's built in, that sort of thing. My rule of thumb is if it's built into the machine, build it into the kernel. If it's something you plug into the machine, make it as a module. So for instance, for my SD card reader, which I recently, within the last 6 months, got working in Gentoo, only because I finally decided let's try and do this, and I got it running proper, I used that and set it up as a module. But for my built-in webcam, which is a UVC style, I have it set up to build it into the kernel. If you're ever wondering about what drivers you should put into a kernel, this is why I like to take a live DVD that's new and you boot into it, and if you go into the console, you can then do things like, let me clear this mess here. You can do things like lsmod. Let me just make sure that I have access to everything. lsmod will show you what modules you have. As you can see, I have very few that I actually load, but if you were in a live DVD, they're going to load everything as modules because they don't know what kind of hardware you have. Another big one is lspci, which is going to show you all your PCI devices. Now, if you were to ever do this via the verbose option, then you're going to see a lot of good information. If you scroll up here, for instance, and we find something like my SD card reader, you'll see that it actually has some information about it, what it's running, and you'll see kernel modules, and this is important. For that, it's using the SDHCI_PCI. So you're going to want to make sure you install those particular kernel modules to make it work. Here's my FireWire, for instance, and it's using the FireWire_OHCI. If we continue to look up here, here's my Ethernet wired controller, and you see that it's using the R8169. My wireless is right above it with IWL Wi-Fi. My sound card is using SND HDA Intel, and of course my video is Nouveau. So those are the most important things that you're going to want to look for, and anything else in the list. And it's really good to use a live DVD or something that's up to date, that's going to just find everything, because you can see these things. And then you can go back into your Gentoo box and you can look for them. And as I've mentioned in previous videos, if you're searching, for instance, for one of these drivers, and we'll just take a quick look at one of these and see if we can use it as a good example. Nouveau, for instance. NOUV-EAU. Alright, so we do a search, NOUV-EAU, and you will see that it comes up with all the modules that it finds, like DRM_Nouveau, and it tells you that you're going to look into device drivers under graphics support, and that it's going to be defined under drivers GPU DRM Nouveau. So because of that, for instance, we can now get out of this and go to device drivers graphics support, and we are in device drivers right now, so we look for graphics support. Scroll through, there's graphics support, and you'll see here's your Nouveau. Now if you're concerned as to whether or not Nouveau is the right one that you're really wanting, if you hit the slash key, or not the slash key, but the help key on this, this is going to tell you, oh, this is config_DRM Nouveau, and so that's the one we're looking for. We want to make sure it's enabled. We exit back out, we make sure it's enabled. Here are a few options for it, and we make sure that it's built into the kernel if we want to make sure it's used right away. And we're good to go with those drivers. We exit out of that one and get out of graph. There we're back into our main device drivers. Now with that, you can also go back and look at other ones that are here. For instance, your Sound HDA Intel. So we can just do Sound HDA and see what we can find. We use /SND_HDA, and you'll see that there's a few options here. Sound HDA input jack, Sound HDA DSP, but it's mostly all going to be in device drivers, sound card support, advanced also, well, just ALSA, Advanced Linux Sound Architecture. If you ever wonder what ALSA stands for, that's what it stands for. You go into PCI sound devices, and you're going to see here Intel HD audio is what you're going to want to set. And very easily we go into there, so we say sound card support, ALSA, we go to PCI sound drivers, and you'll notice I've taken out everything else because I don't have any of that hardware. I'll never have that hardware in this laptop, but there it is, Intel HD audio, and then you can customize all the important things with it that you want to work for that driver. And like I said, if you're ever concerned about it, go to the help, and it's going to tell you all about it and give you some information. Very good information to have when doing this. As I said, those main items, your sound, your video, any ports that you may have, like my system has FireWire. It doesn't have USB 3.0, so I don't set that up. If you had parallel support, you want to set that up. But that's a good place to find that information so that you can build it within your Gentoo box. We exit out of here. Exit out of here. We're going to go back to the main menu because we've pretty much given you a few good examples. The only other place that you want to make sure you look at is file systems. You want to make sure that any file system you've built for your system that's going to work is set up. Now in the newest kernel, this is really nice because the ext4 area actually has a place where it uses ext4 for ext2 and 3. So you don't have to turn this on or this on. You can just build it into right here, and that will save you a lot of help. And if you look down, you can see that there's riser FS, JFS, XFS. All of those are very important if you're using them. I don't have JFS or XFS set up, so I don't have them built in. And this is how you can make your kernel as robust as you need it to be or as minimal as you want it to be. We go on down here. There's a few more that we want to look at. CD-ROM DVD file systems. If you do have a CD-ROM or DVD, you want to make sure you build this stuff into your kernel. DOS, FAT, and NTFS. I always build that into the kernel. Always make sure that NTFS write support is there. Your pseudo file systems you very seldom will ever have to worry about. I just leave it default. And then miscellaneous file systems is another big one. If you're using for any reason Apple Macintosh file system support, for instance, the extended HFS file system, BIOS, any of these, if they work for you, then you need to enable them for your file system. If you're ever wondering if you can use or read a disk from a different file system, yes you can. You just need to build this either as a module or as a build it into your kernel. Now, did he do any of that? For instance, say for instance we wanted to set this up so that we could read HFS file systems from Apple. We can hit the space bar there, it'll make it as a module. Hit the space bar again, it will actually build it into the kernel, and I don't want it for right now, so I'm just going to take it out. So one more space and it's back to being out. The last one within here that you want to make sure you look at, this is important, NFS, network file systems. This is where you want to turn on your client support, your server support. If you're going to make it so that you can share directories, you need the NFS server support set up. If you're going to make it so you can share other directories, you want to make sure the NFS client is set up. Another big one is if you share Windows files or you have a NAS drive or anything like that, you're going to want to look at the CIFS support and build that into it. As you can see, all of this is set up for me already because we're using the .config file from a previous install. Now, we've gone through that. We exit out, exit out, exit out of there. It's now going to ask us if we want to save it. We'll go ahead and do that. And now it's going to build my kernel. Now I'm going to go ahead and pause it for now because this is going to be way so long already. We're at 16 minutes. And we will get back with you in just a moment once this finishes compiling. And here we go. Only a second for you, but a few more minutes for me. Just long enough to get a delicious meal tonight. Had bangers and mash. Very good. Anyway, back to what matters. Here we go. I've kind of scrolled up a little bit. Took about 21 minutes to go ahead and compile the kernel with my system, and then installing the drivers, modules I should say, took less than a minute there. Now if we do a uname, let me get into this here. We do a uname dash, what is it, R? Yes. You will see that we are currently running 3.10.7. What I'm going to do here is, as you see, it says kernel copied and linked to vmlinuz. If we do an ls/boot, we will see that we now have Linux 3.10.17, 3.10.7 still good, and we have our link to vmlinuz. If we look at that, we see that vmlinuz is now pointing to the new kernel. So I will reboot, join you in a moment, and we will verify that everything is up and working. And we are back. Now, one thing I did notice when I rebooted were that there were a couple modules that failed to load, and they are VirtualBox modules. Now, if you have modules that have been built against your kernel and you do an update like this, you're going to need to rebuild those modules. Now, according to the Gentoo.org wiki for VirtualBox, right down here I found emerge-1 at module-rebuild. So we're going to copy that command here. We're going to go in there as root. And if I can type my password proper. There we go. Paste that in here. And we're going to see what it pulls up here real quick. And this is important. When you're rebuilding your kernel, you got to remember that certain modules have been built against other kernels. So if you have a new kernel, you're going to have to do this to make sure that these modules or anything else that you've built specifically outside of the kernel, you'll have to redo to make sure that they work proper. While that does that, however, I will show you that by doing a uname-r now shows that we are in 3.10.17-Gentoo as the version of the kernel, and we are back up and running, and everything is running proper. My music is working, my video is working, webcam should be still working, all that looks good, and for all other reasons we are complete. So while this calculates dependencies and figures out everything else that it may need, I will say what I always say. If it's morning, evening, noon, or night, whatever you're having, I hope you're enjoying it. Thank you for watching. Thank you for seeing how easy it is when doing a minor kernel update, that you can very easily get in there, take care of things, and within a half an hour have everything built and ready to go and booted back into the Linux Gentoo system. Until next time, we will talk to you later. Bye.